Well, welcome everyone to Going for the Gold medal, that is. I'm Karen Hesser. In addition to my position here as CEO of Five Rivers Metro Parks in Dayton, Ohio, I have the pleasure to serve as the current chair of the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration's Gold Medal Committee. Also with us today is Stacy Dickey, the vice chair for the Gold Medal Committee, and our Academy president, Tracy Crawford, our president-elect, Cindy Sullivan, and our Academy Executive Director, Jane Adams. And also somewhere out there in Cyberland is our liaison to the gold medal judges, the one and only Mr. Rod Torillo. So thank you everyone for joining us in addition to all of the attendees. Today's session is a little bit of a multifaceted arrangement. I'm going to explain the background and requirements to apply for the gold medal. And then you'll hear from this esteemed panel on how they helped lead their agencies to be Grand Plaque recipients. And so speaking of the panel, let me introduce them to you. We have Cheryl Michelet, the Director of Communications with BREC, which is the Recreation and Park Commission for the Parish of East Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Aaron Perry, currently the Vice President of Strategic Growth for Block by Block, but he's here today to represent his former agency, South Bend Venues, Parks and Arts, South Bend, Indiana, and Rachel Goodwin, the town manager with the town of Fountain Hills, Arizona. So you're going to hear from each of them in just a little bit. So for doing this thing, we have two poll questions today, and I'll ask the first one right now to better understand our audience a little bit. Did you attend the session in Dallas?
Oh, good.
Okay. Just looking over at my other screen to see the results here.
So this is new audience, Karen. It's 81%
Okay.
said they did not attend and 19% said they did.
Okay. So the National Gold Medal Award honors public park and recreation agencies and state park systems throughout the United States and armed forces recreation programs worldwide that demonstrate excellence in long-range planning, resource management, and innovative approaches to delivering superb park and recreation services with fiscally sound business practices. The National Gold Medal Award Program is governed and administered by the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration in partnership with NRPA. And we're very pleased that the National Gold Medal Award Program is sponsored by Musco Lighting. So each application is independently judged by a panel of 5 park and recreation professionals selected by the Academy based upon their management experience, the size and type of agency, geographic location, and diversity. From the pool of applications, the judges select 4 agencies in each population category, armed forces, and state parks every other year as a finalist. The 4 finalists in each category are announced at the end of April, and then the finalist and Grand Plaque Awards are then presented at the NRPA Annual Park and Recreation Conference. To be eligible, the National Gold Medal Award Program is open to any public park and recreation agency, state park system, and armed forces recreation program, again, worldwide. There's no membership with any organization needed to actually apply. The finalist award recipients may reapply year to year. However, the lucky Grand Plaque Award recipients must wait 5 years to reapply. And one of the best parts of this is that there is no fee required to apply for a National Gold Medal. So again, as I mentioned, sort of an overview of the various classes. So depending upon the population that your agency serves, you would fall into one of these categories. This is the 2024 timeline. So we obviously are in December. So the application portal opened a month ago. You'll see that the deadline, sufficient timing, closes on March 1st, 2024. So you have a little bit of time. And again, depending on the selection, the presentation, we put unconfirmed, still, we'll work out the final details with NRPA in terms of the actual date and time for the presentation of the finalist and grand plaque awards. Okay, it's very easy. It's an online application. It's an essay question format that I'm going to give you a highlight of here in a little bit. Making sure, as for an agency, that you're looking back for the last 3 years. Okay, so for the past 3 years. And then a 3-page executive summary of the most recent agency master plan and strategic plan. So again, not going to spend a lot of time on the questions because they are available on our Academy website, and I'll give you that address at the end of the program. But it just kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like in terms of some of what you'll need to gather. Okay, it says 2023 questions, but they're the same for 2024, just for the record. Okay. The hardest part, I think, what I've heard so far is that narrowing down the responses to the word count, but you'll hear from our panel in a little bit about that. So it's time for our next poll question. Please indicate if your agency is applying for or considering applying for the first time this year. Okay, some of you are just simply looking for some information and gearing up. So now we're going to turn to our esteemed panel, and we're going to ask for any of you on the call, if you have questions during the course of some of these questions that I'm going to ask the panel, go ahead and put those into the chat, and Stacy will be monitoring that for us and sharing them out as needed. So bring up the panel, and again, I'll just give you an idea of who they are. This is Rachel Goodwin. Again, she's the town manager for the town of Fountain Hills in Arizona. We have Erin Perry representing South Bend Venues, Parks and Arts. And Cheryl Michelet from Breck down there in Louisiana. Okay. Hop back here for a second. So panel, what motivated you to apply for the gold medal, and what did it mean for your agency and your community?
I'll start. So Breck won the gold medal back in 1975 and again in 1991. And then there was a gap, and we hired Superintendent Carolyn McKnight, who was a leader in NRPA, still is. When she accepted the position, she let us know we were going to be back in the running. And so she set a deadline that we would start our first application would be turned in 2017. We beat that by a year despite a parish-wide flood, and applied in 2016. And the goal there was to raise the agency profile and remind the community how important parks and recreation are, especially in underserved areas. And during climate events like the historic flood that we had and hurricanes that we've had frequently in South Louisiana.
Aaron, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
You're on.
Okay. So here at Fountain Hills, we're a pretty small community. We're about 25,000, and the gold medal was really never on the radar. When I took over as the director, we made some significant strides and improvements and set the goal as our strategic plan to just apply. Didn't have to win, didn't have to do it. It was just apply, just get to a point where we felt strong enough that we could talk the talk and walk the walk. And then sort of put it out there and get an unbiased, unvarnished opinion of, are we doing what we say we're doing, right? And that was really what I wanted, was the feedback. And as we got closer and closer, it became really evident to our community and our staff that, yeah, we do good. We do good stuff. Like, look at what we're doing. We're doing this and we're doing this. And it became this sort of rallying effort, internally and externally, to say, hey, we think we do a good job. Let's find out. And when we went out there to prove that point, it was validating. It was extremely validating to not only say, yeah, I think we do a good job, but the industry says we're doing a good job. So it was very motivating to go through the effort and the process. And what it meant as a community is that, yeah, just because you're small, just because you're a bedroom community, or you may not have all of the resources that the big guys have, doesn't mean that you're not doing excellent work in your field. And that was very meaningful.
Thanks, Rachel.
So
Aaron?
for us, I would say, let's see, about 16 years ago, the city of South Bend showed up on the top of Newsweek's top dying cities in America's list. And so for us, it was kind of this hang our heads type moment in the city's history, just, almost 2 decades ago now. But we use that as a rallying cry in our community to come back and really say, hey, we're going to be excellent in the things we do. And the way we defined excellent, it's people throw that word around a lot, right? But the way we defined excellent was either top in state or top 5 in the country. And so what we started doing is trying to set up KPIs and otherwise to kind of prove to ourselves where we measured. And of course, through the state agency and otherwise, we were able to bring home some top honors and whatnot. And I remember sitting at NRPA, I forget which one it was, but just watching one of these gold medal ceremonies going, we're good enough. We can do this. And so I don't think we were ready right out of the gate. And in fact, we didn't apply right away, but we started applying a higher level of sophistication to the things we do, and talked about attached impact drivers to everything we did in our community, started telling our story in more robust and unique ways. And I thought the moment was ripe after a brand new bond issuance and new master plan and so on and so forth for us to apply. And we did, and we felt great about that, and actually got to become a finalist the first time we ever applied. And we were hooting and hollering about that. And it was a little bit of a disappointing moment when we found out we didn't win in that room amongst all our peers the first time around. But of course, as you'll hear us say a couple of times throughout this webinar, is that apply again, and that's what we did. And our second year, we took home the top honors, and it meant a ton for our community. Going back to where I started, to say that America's number 8 most dying city was able to boast one of the parks departments in the country. So that was good for our community.
That's awesome. Well, so our second question is one that is important to many agencies, and that is, how did you manage the compilation and composition of information to answer the questions? And if you applied more than once, what do you think made the difference in your successful application?
Do we want to do same order or go backwards?
As
Go
could
ahead,
do rock,
Cheryl.
paper, scissors.
So our process is we kind of had to fit it into the regular process that we have every year, which is we do a agency-wide annual report where each department submits information, and then I usually take that and make it into a stylized annual report. And they were due at the same time, the stylized one and the gold medal. And so after fighting with that for a couple of years, I decided to make the gold medal application our annual report, because I felt like, what else? It doesn't make sense. Why would we not report this information to the community if it's important enough to win a gold medal? So I said we started in 2016. We were fortunate enough to become a finalist that year. And then I'll talk more about it later, but it was many years before we actually won. So I kind of have a whole process down. I start in a Word document with all of the questions on there. I have scores from the previous year. I have the word count. I'm collecting information from annual reports. We have meetings where we're volleying back and forth, like where did we have the biggest impact? Where was our best measurement? Things like that. And trying to make sure that answers, because you can repeat answers, that you keep the really good ones, but then you change those as you need, like the community challenge. We've had several of those. And so those have changed. And then, you know, we've done sessions even on those challenges. I actually think that's one thing that helped us win. When you do the answers that are the 3 pillars, I started out telling stories. And then after looking at the scores, I started doing bullets. Because I felt like we were doing so much for conservation and health and I forgot the third one, the terminology. Yes, equity. I felt like we were doing a lot in all those areas. And when you're telling a narrative story, you can't fit as much information in. So I started doing bullets, and the scores showed that that did make an impact. We went from, say, 8 out of 15 to a 14 out of 15 in those areas. And then we generally have a press release ready to go. We have social media posts ready to go, and we have video script written and ready to go. It's taken from all of that information so that if we are a finalist, we're ready right away to get moving on that. We actually decided the video was so important that we're doing it anyway. Even though we can't apply for 5 years, yay. I'm still doing that annual report and gold medal so that when we get back in, we're ready. And we still do, we call it an annual report video right now, because why not tell your story in multiple platforms? So I think that answers most of it. Karen, did I leave anything out?
I think so.
Okay.
How about you, Aaron?
Okay, well, let's see. The way we organized everything was first bringing together like a cross-functional group of division heads. And then we asked each division head to bring one of their colleagues to the table. And so that way there's 5 different divisions in the VPA agency. And so that way we had 10 people around the table looking at all the questions. And actually, before we even looked at all the questions, we just went through and brainstormed, threw everything up on a whiteboard, like any good old brainstorming session, and said, what makes us gold medal worthy? And so now we just have, you know, dozens of things that we thought were gold medal worthy. Then we started looking at the questions, and we started taking those little sticky notes and categorizing, putting them into the categories that they might belong in. Of course, then you're really set with way more answers and way more things that you think make you gold medal worthy than could ever fit in the 150 words. And so, so what we tried to do then is to really calibrate that and say, what is the true definition of best in the country? And so everybody has a kind of an equity program, but why is ours the best? So go through and really kind of ask yourself those things and apply with honesty some metrics to those things wherever possible to be able to tell that story. in a concise manner. And so I think that's the way the workflow kind of managed, but that's not what we did the first time around. And so I think that was an important key to our success, that we brought those people together. The first time around, it was like me and my grant writer. And we were kind of we asked people to email us some things, or otherwise we had maybe somebody else proofread it. But the fact that we had so many people at the table helping kind of create the soup, I think that was critical. And then we had some other agency partners, some friends of ours, a past gold medal winner, actually proofread and kind of provide some feedback before we submitted it. And so I think those are the things we did differently the second time around that kind of led to our success.
And Rachel, before you go, just one thing that I'd like to say from what Aaron said, we compete against cities that have over 1 million people, and we have 450,000 in our parish. And he's right, everybody has something that fits all those categories. But I think it's important what is unique to your community. And you might, like, y'all might have a similar type of equity program, but why does it fit your community? And how do you serve your community in the best way? And how does that make you stand out? And that's why I said, I think the challenge questions helped us, because in every instance, it made us serve our community better, whatever the challenge was that we were going through. And I'm sorry, Rachel, now your turn.
No, you're good. You guys actually hit a lot of the same points, in so much as you kind of referenced bringing your teams together, bringing everybody's kind of thoughts and input. And I think that that's important no matter what size agency you are, because your parks team looks at things differently than your recs team, than your special events squad, than your senior services folks. They all see the different aspects of what they do. And when you're trying to answer these questions of why are you gold medal worthy, why are you the best, and you go, give me an example of a time where we met our equity needs, and all of these examples start coming out. And yes, you write them on your whiteboard, you write them on stickies, whatever you do, and you start to realize that you can answer this question 18 different ways. And then you have to distill from there, and zero down into what really nails our best example of what we're doing. And the great thing is you probably have a dozen really good examples. You just have to find the best really good one. So there's not a wrong answer in that capacity, which is exciting. And that, I think, fuels that fire to really find the best examples and do that. You guys kind of already touched on it, and you might have already noticed if you've ever applied before, or if you've started to look through it, or if you looked at Karen's couple of first slides, you have to be succinct. And you might want to tell your story, and it's very easy to go on and on and on. Unfortunately, you don't have that opportunity. You have to tell your story, and you have to hit these word counts that are really, really difficult. So to the point Aaron made, have other people read it, see if you're getting your point across. You know what you're trying to say, but when you have limited words and limited capacity to tell that story, have somebody double check it. We did as well. Aaron, you mentioned you worked with your grant writer the first time. We also did the same thing. We applied. On our first try, we were a finalist, but we did not win. Yes, it is sadly disappointing. All I can say is thank goodness it was the COVID year and I had a mask on, so all my tears were dried by my mask. But the second year when we applied, but the first year when we first started pulling stuff together, we had a volunteer grant writer who said, I'll come help you. We can do this. And they took a crack at it and they brought it back. And I remember reading it and going, oh no, this is not going to do. And it was really hard to translate that and say, this is not going to cut it. Like, this is not telling our story well. But what I think that showed right out of the gate, and thankfully we caught it early, was that you and your team are the best storytellers you have. You know what you do and why it matters and how to measure it. Having someone else come in and tell your story is difficult. So I would say leverage the folks that are in-house that know what you do and how you do it. Use their points of view and their perspective to cultivate the best application and most well-rounded, multifaceted approach that you can. If you have your parks guy write it, it's going to be all about parks. If you have your events team write it, it's going to be all about the special events. Integrating all of those different facets is really important, I think. And what was the difference between, I don't know. I've shared this previously, but for this group, we didn't get our scores back for whatever reason. We didn't know what we did well in and what we didn't. And we had to be very, very vulnerable and humble and come back to the table. As much as I didn't want to rewrite it, and much as I don't want to do this again. It was hard. It was hard, and it was disappointing, and it was frustrating. But at the end of the day, it's still a very worthy endeavor, and I would never trade it for anything. So we came back to the table. We reviewed our application where we thought we could maybe do better. What did we tell the story? This is the best example. Can we refine this? Did we really hit the nail on this element? And we went back and we kept some examples. We exchanged others. And then resubmitted. So I think what did the difference maker for us was being that vulnerable and willing to come back and look at something with fresh eyes and hear and truly critically review what we had submitted and where we thought our shortcomings might have been. And it's being honest with yourself and being willing to see it. Is hard, but it's worth it.
Thank you
And
all.
don't use,
Listening to you guys. Hang on just a second there. I have a question here because you talked about being vulnerable and it's hard and it's difficult. At the same time, a worthy endeavor. So my sub question to question 2 is, how long did it take for the compilation of the information, right? So this is not something, for instance, you can decide on February 15th that you're going to apply by March 1st. So if you could all share your perspectives in terms of the time commitment for the team.
gosh, I'll say it. I mean, it was every bit of 2 to 3 months of work from the time we decided we were going to apply to the brainstorming, getting the team together, revising, having others proofread and otherwise. And so that takes a lot of effort. And that's just the essay portion. Then you got to go back and if you're a finalist, you got to make a video, right? And so that takes some effort too. And that's something we did different on the second time around too, by the way. The first time around, our video was basically just our staff somewhat narrating a response to the questions, kind of almost rehashing our application. The second time around, we used it as way more of a commercial to brag as to like, here's who we are and show a lot of visuals. And so we put a lot more effort. We didn't just rehash it. It's another chance for you to show off to the judges. And so I think that was something we did differently, but it takes a significant amount of time and effort, and you can't just plug it into ChatGPT and hope it's going to work.
Let's hope not.
I would agree with Aaron. I don't know about everybody else, but I think we've all got other things to do besides just the gold medal application. This is in addition to your regular duties. So trying to build in enough time to review and brainstorm and get your team together and make sure that you've got your arms around it and feel like you have dedicated. Yeah, you definitely need that 2 to 3 month window because you're going to take it probably in small increments until you get to a point where you're like, okay, now it's all, you're going to start honing in on things and really narrowing it and getting across the finish line. Because it does seem daunting and you feel like there's a lot of time, but like anything, those deadlines creep up on you. So scheduling that and planning it out is important.
Just want to be conscious of that for sure.
Yeah, and right. And ours, I'm always waiting to get all of those annual reports, and trying to do some of the other things before, like the 3-page summaries, updating those and reaching out to everybody to say, I'm reading this. Is this the best thing you want to include here? Making sure we're getting the HR information, the finance information. All of that should be easier now because the new requirement is that your data is now coming from it used to be ProRageous, and that's what I think about it, Park Metrics. And so you just need to make sure that your folks are putting information in that, because that's not part of the application anymore. I think that the March 1st deadline for us would make it a little tougher. Being more toward the end of March helps, just because we're doing 2 annual reports. And we won't have the year-end data until January. So I wouldn't even start until January, to be honest with you. And I did use every bit of that time. And I got to the point where I was actually calling our COO, who used to be an internal auditor. She knew things that, like, she'd say, nope, I know this little piece of information that made every question stronger. I'd say, okay, I'm about to hit send, say a prayer now, and hit send. And we'd both say a prayer at the same time. After 7 years, it finally worked. I was saving that information for later, because every time I say it, it hurts my heart. But yeah, it took 7 years.
Yeah. Well, our final prepared question for all of you is, what is your one piece of advice that you would want to share with the audience or a colleague who is considering applying for the gold medal?
Actually, you're first this time.
Oh, I'm first.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys actually sort of mentioned it earlier, but I would say anybody that's applying, tell your story. Tell what is special about you, your agency, your community, your team. What you do and why you do it is different than anybody else. And embracing that and leaning into that is important. Yeah, and Erin, you kind of mentioned, you had read a couple of other people's applications. I know I've been asked for copies of applications, Cheryl. I know you have too. And it's great to read them in order to get a vibe, to get a sense of it, but you can't duplicate it. You have to tell your story. And that's what I would recommend. Being authentic, tell your story. And then the other, in terms of a technical advice, I would say answer the question. We had trouble with that when we had to refine multiple times to say, what is it asking for? What is it asking? And then, because sometimes you would kind of take it in a direction and someone else would read it and go, that's great, but that's not what the question says. So be aware of what the question is asking you, and then make sure your answer applies. That would be where 2 pieces of information that I know we worked towards.
I would say,
Oh, you go ahead.
sure. All right, I'll jump in. I would say that's a really good advice, Rachel, in terms of read and reread the question to make sure you're specifically answering the question that was asked, and using the data or bragging points you already have as a shortcut for the judges. Like, for example, if you got any kind of state or regional or national attention, or passed some legislation, or have a metric that improved X number of percents or otherwise, be able to put those in there, not just say, oh yeah, we were the best, or we had more, or we did this. Get really crisp on some of those things. But interestingly enough, like, you're gonna have, going back to where we started, you're gonna have multiple things that you're gonna want to brag about. And sometimes if you allow enough time, you could say, well, I'm only allowed to use 3 examples or 150 words here, but I do want to talk about this one. It just doesn't fit here. It's nice and crisp as it is. You might be able to just tweak some language and put it into another question slightly. I found that to be helpful. Like, don't try to squeeze too much into one question. There could be things that you are really authentically doing well that could find a home in another area. But that only comes if you allow yourself enough breathing room and time to make those edits.
I remember, Cheryl, before you jump in, one of you said in Dallas that it was important to pay attention to not using the same example in different questions. Use different examples throughout the application. So
Yeah, and I would say, when you're starting this process, remember what it's for. So I'm very competitive. It got to the point where for me, it was just all about, we got to win this thing. It's been so long. But really, the point is that NRPA, that the Academy wants us to show that we've adopted best practices. So that should be your focus. They're forcing you to do things that are best practices. For example, a few years ago, it was, we want a 3-page summary of your strategic plan. Now it's a 3-page summary of your strategic and master plan. I can tell you that threw us at the first year, and our answer was terrible, what we submitted, because frankly, when we did our 10-year strategic plan, it didn't have a master plan component. And so I talked long and hard with our head of planning and engineering, and by the next year, we actually had that. It was real, but now we're working, we changed what we're doing. We're not going to do another 10-year strategic plan. We're going to do a 10-year master plan, and we're going to have 3-year strategic plans inside it, because that makes more sense. And they're asking us to do it because it's a best practice. And the second thing is, don't give up if you don't win. Like Rachel said, it is heartbreaking when you don't. I've sat in that room. I've doubled over for a few minutes. I've had to look my superintendent in the face and say, we'll be back at it next year, when I'm thinking, I don't want to write this thing again, but you pick yourself back up. People know that you either won or you didn't. You hear it the rest of the conference. But that's okay, because what they remember later, it's like the Olympics. Like, if you got a bronze medal, would you give it back? No. That doesn't make it any better when you're sitting in things like this and you're hearing people who have won and you're like, but I know how good we are. So you just have to keep trying it, and then know, whether you win or not, this process will help you serve your community better. And that's the main goal. We're trying to make our communities better places to live, work, and play, and being able to show that we're getting better, we're improving. That's what this is. And Baton Rouge has a little bit of an identity crisis. Like, we're not New Orleans, but saying we're #1 on a national list is huge. And so it's taken a while for it to sink in. We've had a few columnists go, yeah, they kind of tout that little award, and then we won, and it was a national gold medal, and then they saw the national folks talking about it. Now they're actually talking about, we have a gold medal system in our community, and you'll see that resonate, and it's pretty awesome.
Great. So Cheryl, we had talked about this in Dallas, and kind of bled into how things were celebrated. I can tell you that I have, as a souvenir here from Cheryl, a gold medal coin that they gave out Mardi Gras and to staff and whatnot. So the level of celebration obviously varies in various communities. We don't all have Mardi Gras parades. But it is certainly something to be celebrated. And to the panelist's point, just because you don't necessarily win the grand plaque every time, the notion that that your community is a finalist across the country is huge. It should not be discounted, and that's important. We had this past year, and again, a lot of this information is on the Academy website, but you can literally see, well, we have to update for 23, but all of the past year winners. So if you'd like to see where, if there's someone, an agency in your community, you know, have they ever won, or in some cases, multiple times, right? So I know, for instance, Cleveland, Ohio here has won 4 or 5 times, as an example. So it's not unheard of. So.
And one thing I'd like to say about that is, we decided after we won, we always have a gold medal page on our website. because that's where you put the press release, that's where you put your video. Well, after we won, we put the just the plain application on there. We put the 3-year summaries on there. We put the video. So if you go to breck.org/gold medal, you can read all of that. And a few people reached out after Dallas, and I've even sent them the Word document. So again, it's just like Rachel and Aaron said, it's got to be your community. But if you do want to see, I don't know, it kind of helped me to have a template each year. That first year, it's real intimidating when you don't have anything to start from. So I really have just taken that Word document and changed it and put things in red or yellow if I'm saying, hey, I kind of like these 5 things, help me narrow it down to 3 or whatever. And you can sort of see that thought process in that. It's real ugly. It's the Word document, but I'm happy to share it.
Do we
Karen,
have
we
any
do-
of the 23 winners on screen here today?
Say again, Karen,
What's that?
what did you say?
I was just wondering if any of the 23 Grand Plaque winners happen to be on today.
23, no.
No? Okay.
Karen, we do have a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. The first question was, is there a rubric to show how points are scored for each question?
Hey, I was looking at the agenda for the Park Foundation meeting. Yeah,
So, yeah, so if I could reply that on the Academy website, under the gold medal page, section of the website, we do have all of the questions as a PDF, and it shows each question's the point for each, total points for each question, as well as the word count for each question. So, I mean, that's the closest we have to quote a rubric, if you will.
I know Rod is on the call and he might have a little input on that, but I think each judge individually, scores the question on the applications.
Right.
Yep, that's correct.
And that's done independently. And then all of the data from each of the judges is put into a portal and then averaged. Is that accurate?
Well, so let's share this, and Rod, correct me or add on if you can, but everybody they apply online. And then once the applications close, the judges, and we have 5 gold medal judges, the judges look at each application, each question, taking hours and hours and hours of time. And then they typically, what I've heard is that they read through an application in toto, and then they go to the next application and read that in toto, and the next, and then they go back, and then they begin to assess applications in relationship to others that have applied, if that makes sense. Then they do the scores for each of the questions. Then once, and the judging, they have to have that judging done by a particular date. And once the judges have completed their assignment, then we do a master spreadsheet that shows what each judge, how they scored each question for each agency. And then that is shared with the judges as well. Is that clear? Rod, did I do a good job, or is that wrong?
Nope, that's pretty close.
Okay.
We they each do that independently through the first round, and then based on those independent judgments, that is what then determines who the finalists are based on the points.
And when
So
the
I
judges,
see a question here that says, how much does the video weigh on your final score?
Well, I would say that, basically, once the judges have the finalists for each of the classes, that's when they then get a chance to come together. They've been doing all the judging independently to that point, and it's almost a do-over. Then everybody's kind of on an equal footing, and they come together and they look at the videos together and have their notes and discussion in regards to the original application and all of that. And through that process, they come to a determination of who the grand winner should be. So it's almost a do-over when you get to the finalist level, and not a do-over, but a fresh start. And the video comes into play for sure, but it's not the single most important element by any stretch of the imagination.
Thanks,
And
Rod.
there was another question about receiving their scores after they apply. When the program is over, will each applicant receive what they scored on their application?
So we share the scores with each applicant once the awards have been presented at the NRPA conference. So they will get their, what we share is in their population category. We share for each question, they get the top score and the bottom score, and then their agency score. We don't share who those agencies are. So they can't see which, they can't see that Breck got a 10 out of 15. They just get their score, the top score, the low score, and their score. But those are not shared until after the awards are presented, which will be in October.
Right. And
And what-
CAPRA accreditation is not associated with anything with the gold medal. Right? It can be
Well-
considered as a tiebreaker, if you will, but
That's right.
it's not mandatory.
One of the earlier questions on the chat was, are a master plan and strategic plan by the agency required, or can it be one or the other?
It's two separate entries now. So there's a 3-page summary of your master plan and a 3-page summary of your strategic plan. And I believe it's been that way for the last 2-3 years.
Mhm. So the CAPRA accreditation comes in when there is a tie in the score. Then the CAPRA accredited agency receives a few more points for being accredited.
And that's also a good answer to a question. We've always put that in there, and that's one way Breck is unique because we were one of the first in the country to be accredited. So I would always include that if you are, and if you're not, you can talk about working toward it if you're doing that.
So we have a number of resources available on the Academy's website, on the gold medal section of our website. So please use those resources. And I certainly would encourage anyone, if you do have any questions as you move through the application, that you can certainly email us at info@goldmedal.org. Is that correct, Britt? Probably not correct. Sorry.
I believe it is because I've used that many times.
There any more questions out there?
Those are the only questions that we've had so far.
Okay. Well, any final words from our panelists for the group for posterity?
I'd just say good luck, and if you need any help, reach out to any of us. We'll be happy to help you. It's hard-earned knowledge, and so it's good to share. And our community, I think it's great that we're not so competitive that we don't want to help each other. And I know we're certainly willing to be a resource for anybody who needs it.
So appreciate that. And just so you all realize that reaching the finalist level of the National Gold Medal Award Program, that in and of itself is an achievement. And so it's about, I think it's about reaching that finalist level. And then should you receive the gold medal grand plaque, that's the icing on the cake. But the cake is becoming a finalist.
You know, and Aaron said this earlier, where, you know, sitting in the room and in the session to see the agencies receive them, and to know individually and collectively within your own agency that you are gold medal worthy, and striving for that continuous improvement, and you know, stretching the goals there a little bit for both yourself as a professional and for your agency, will in turn support your community. So it just sort of feeds back into each other. And for the record, this is no small task for the judges to go through all of these applications. So for Rod and Rachel, certainly as a guest judge, and others that I know are on the call, thank you so much for your time and effort for that. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here to highlight the website for the Academy. You can actually put in American Academy of Park and Recreation Administration into Google, and you'll find us. And then from that homepage, be able to learn all about the various programs that we have within the Academy. So
I'll agree with what Cheryl said too, by the way, as a closing remark. Definitely willing to answer any questions or be a resource or proofread or whatever the case may be. We want to see this industry continue to grow and evolve. And Karen, I think it's more rewarding if you're a finalist one year and then come back and win the next year. It makes you become a little bit stronger, but not only figuratively, but also literally, because when you get the finalist plaque, you don't realize how heavy the grand medal is when you get it. So I think it's worth being up there as a finalist once and then coming back later and getting the grand plaque. It's more rewarding.
that's great.
And I would say if you're on the fence about it, if you don't know, maybe we're gold medal ready, maybe we're not, do it. Just go through the process. Again, you'll learn about yourself. You'll learn more than I think you will understand until you do it. So when in doubt, just jump in and give it a go. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? There's a lot to be learned and very little to lose, and you may be surprised. So I would say absolutely it's worth it, and to jump in.
Well, I'm personally very happy to have had the privilege of working with Cheryl and Aaron and my friend Rachel from Arizona here to prepare for Dallas and then to prepare for the webinar. So wonderful resources through the guidance of Jane and the Academy to produce this program. So very, very pleased. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today for this.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah.